the journey a young person goes through from the age of 6 until 16 or so, changing schools, adolescence, and bullying.
So to say that character is more important than academics, I think would be to avoid what I'm saying is interdependent. I couldn't ask you now to go and solve heart surgery because you don't have the expertise in heart surgery.
No, it wouldn't go well.
Someone would be in trouble. So I wouldn't ask you to do that. So when you're talking about is knowledge important, massively important. Yes, mums and dads have a massive impact. Like the biggest impact without a question on values and attitudes, behaviours and beliefs. If your end point was black belt that I'm going to retire, that's the wrong attitude. You're continuously progressing. The black belt's just a measure.
I've just come back from the most incredible interview with Dubai's most authentic headmaster. It is Bret Girven. Now, Bret and I sit down and we discuss everything from bullying, from resilience, from do schools have a one-size-fits-all approach? How are they changing that in Arbor School here in Dubai? What sort of pressure should parents be putting onto teachers? Does he agree with participation medals? What does Bret think are the most important traits when it comes to developing a young person? Are academics more important than character development? The list goes on and on. We talk about charity, we talk about sustainability, we talk about how we can influence children's behavior going forward so they live a happy and successful life. And we talk about the legacy of Bret and Arbor. Don't miss this episode. So welcome, Bret, to the Warrior Academy podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be down there and fantastic facility. Really cool.
So I know you as the headmaster of my daughter's school, and we're really fans of Arbor and everything you guys stand for, and the school in general. How you manage it, how you run it, is just brilliant from my perspective as a parent. And for anyone who doesn't know you, could you give us a brief insight into who you are, what you do, and what do you get up to here in Dubai?
Sure thing. Won't be a long story. No. Thank you for having me. I'm the school principal at the Arbor School in Dubai. So the Arbor School is an ecological school grounded in the national curriculum, and that sequence is quite important to us. So ecological meaning the widest possible sense of that word, inclusive, connected, interdependent, as opposed to a green school. We're a greenish school, but I would say we're a purpose-driven school, more than just about sustainability. So the school is a national curriculum school, so our what, if you like, is defined by the national curriculum, what levels we teach, what content we decide to cover, those sorts of things are framed by the national curriculum, the same as you might in a British curriculum school in London or a British curriculum school in Singapore. So that defines our what, but I guess what's unique to us is both our how and our why. And those are really tightly linked. So the how then becomes experiential, place-based, driven by big questions, the idea of curiosity being really important for the younger years, curiosity going into connection, understanding what bits of information go together and connecting with their world. Building into passion, and then really building into purpose for our senior years. And so we design the curriculum quite carefully around those ideas. So that's our how. And then the why is about sustainability, the idea of making decisions now that mean that there is enough for all forever, which is our vision. The second pillar is called eco-literacy, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it means understanding ecological concepts and boundaries and constraints, so that you can then build sustainable human futures. So whilst we might have a very green campus, the idea is to use it as a living laboratory to say, look, ecosystems function interdependently. They're resilient in their diversity. When you have an ecosystem, you don't maximize everything, you optimize it. And if we understand that all these things are connected, then when we make decisions in our lives about how to solve problems, we have to solve them for patterns. So eco-literacy is understanding ecological concepts and principles and using it to build a sustainable human future, which again, we can get into, but it's a complex process. And the last one is called environmental justice, which essentially says you and I should share equally in environmental goods and environmental bads.
Right.
And right now we tend to just enjoy the goods and ship out the bads somewhere else, out of sight, out of mind. So the school, that's the sort of the deeper version of the school. Myself, I'm from New Zealand. I've followed my nose through education, and eventually, whilst I was working here in Dubai, the Arbor School opportunity opened up. My background's environmental science and zoology, so it was a pretty good fit. And I've been having a blast for the last 5 years. I moved in just as COVID struck, so I was in the school for a term and a half, and then we had to go through that whole palaver that was the COVID times. But the school's gone strength to strength, and kids are having a blast. We're not perfect, but we're working on it.
Brilliant. I think it's such a fascinating concept around Arbor, and you've got a very strong, powerful why you exist, which I think is very relevant and shows up very clearly. And one thing you missed off your bio there was your amateur boxing days. As we were going around the dojos here, this is something I now discovered. Do you want to give us a quick intro to that as well?
So give us a quick 2-minute round.
A quick demonstration.
No, look, I mean, I love what you do here in terms of building resilience and character, and all those things come out of sports. And I love to challenge myself, whether it's endurance sports. You know, I grew up on the beaches, so I like to surf. I like to go into the mountains and ski, and I get bored quite easily. So I need something to challenge me. So last year, it just popped up on the screen, White Collar Fight Night. I thought I'd get into it. Loved it. The training was fantastic. I lost the match, unfortunately. So now I'm just deciding whether there's a rematch on the cards.
Yeah, right. Fascinating.
I
Cool.
don't think we need a good
If you need a sponsor, let us know, and we'll get some training here for you as well, which will be good fun.
Fabulous.
Maybe we can start a little circuit with headmasters around Dubai. I don't know.
Can you imagine? I don't know if the kids would probably love it, but it might be the wrong kind of competition.
Maybe. So before we sat down together here, there was a few things that we discussed, and I'd love to bring some of them up. One of them is Dubai is a very transient city. Teachers come and go, students come and go, and one of the most heartbreaking things I find for expat kids is they make new friends, and in the next year, there's a 50-60% chance that new best friend is gone. They moved house, they've gone to a different school, or they've gone to a different country. How can parents and how can schools approach that, and what is the right approach with that when you're managing a school here in Dubai?
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon of expats, right? And so I think some children accept it as kind of a facet of their life if they've been here for a long time, which is both upsetting, but also you have to understand that they build resilience to it over time. And so they kind of accept that there's movement and they enjoy their friendships while they occur, and then accept that they're going to be different the next year. Children here, I think, become quite adept at making friendships quite quickly. As a community, as a school, what do we do? Obviously there's a sort of onboarding part. So every year we have new students coming, so it's trying to make sure that transition works. So like you would manage any transition, the earlier that you can start, the better. Drip feed it in, make sure the children have access to groups of the children or a best buddy or a way to kind of find their space in the class early. So if we were bringing in a whole year group, for example, FS1 would have small meetings before the school starts, maybe invite them to do activities. If you're bringing one child into an established group already, that's a slightly trickier fix, because then you've got to make sure there's the right mix of boys, girls, friends, language, all those sorts of things. So that the onboarding part is a little trickier because you don't always have access to them before they arrive. Offboarding, in a sense, is really important. So that transition out and having some closure for the child that's leaving is actually really important. So we'll try and do some departure, some closure activities for the children. Even last year at the end of the year, particularly for our primary school, we had a huge big meeting in the sports hall, all the children in there, and the head of primary then went around and particularly thanked any teacher that was leaving, let the children know that they're moving. So it's not a secret, because I think that's part of it, is you don't want to wake up in the morning and this buddy's gone. I don't think that gives any child any closure. So early and little on the way in, and not ignoring it, and really making sure you acknowledge and close the door on the way out.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. I think it's just having that level of pastoral care throughout. Correct. Being very aware of the transitions, right? I think, certainly when I look at the journey a young person goes through from the age of 6 until 16 or so, it's the three biggest transitions that stand out to me are changing schools, adolescence, and bullying.
Right.
Where ultimately their surroundings change, their social group changes, even their mood and their hormones, everything changes, right? So those are the kind of three big transitions we focus on here. And it's having that consistency of pastoral care throughout the whole thing, which sounds like you guys do a really good job of. How many different countries have you worked in as a teacher?
1, 2, 3, 4 countries there.
4 countries. And what do you think are the unique challenges that you see running a school here in Dubai compared to the countries you worked in?
When you're working in a home country, I guess for me it was New Zealand, and I went to the UK. Whilst there is diversity, there's a sort of homogeneity of culture to a degree, whereas here, I think everybody brings their culture, their experiences, and what good looks like to them. So when you've got a school of, let's just say 1,000 children, whilst each parent might only have 1 or 2. And so what is right to them is quite clear. This is what good looks like to me. is to try and manage that on a scale of 1,000 becomes tricky, because this is, you know, for me, it's what's right for everybody. So everybody having their own understanding of what good looks like is really, really tricky. So how to manage that, I guess, is to make sure that you're really authentic at the point of saying, this is what we offer. Really authentic. You know, if you come and say, are you the best football school in Dubai? I'll say, no, I can tell you where it is. We play football, but we've got some way to go to be the best football team. So if you're looking for that, this is not that place. Because what I don't want is, I don't want anyone coming on board thinking that there's something that is not.
False expectations, hard to meet, upset parents.
Yeah, so authenticity and everything, and that goes through marketing, advertising, recruitment. You've got to be authentic, and
It's just leadership in general. You know, if you're managing anything, having that level of authenticity is vital, right? If you don't want to have someone upset the other side and then damage your reputation. But it's like what you said when we first sat down. You know, I asked you to intro Arbor, and you said, you know, we're not perfect. We're constantly striving to be. It's like what we say at the Warrior Academy. You know, it's every martial arts club in Dubai says they're the best martial arts club in Dubai.
Right.
And I recently released a podcast saying, here are the 10 criteria of what I determined to be the best. And if you're the best, this is what you need to have. And ultimately, it's up to parents to decide. You know, we constantly strive to be that. But I think authenticity is really, really important. What about from a parent's perspective? You're sending your child to a school in Dubai. What are the unique challenges you face compared to other countries then?
Yeah, I guess it's about expectations. So for every child that enters, their parents, let's say I looked at your job, I could have a guess at what you do during the day. Probably don't know exactly what you do during the day. Everyone went to school. 100% of people, as far as I know, went to school, so they all know what schools look like. So they know what my job is. They, you know, well, I assume they know what my job looks like. There's an intent that they know what good teaching and learning looks like. I wouldn't even pretend to assume what good martial arts look like, because you're the expert. And teachers, and me to a degree, have an expertise that is perhaps unknown. So parents enter this with an understanding of what good looks like, and it's very personal. So the challenge is when you've got that from different cultures, nationalities, even the same nationality and culture, but different expectations. Maybe a family comes from a public school background in the UK. Maybe another family comes from a community school background in the UK. So they're coming into it with different versions of what good looks like, and then you're trying to homogenize that and say, this is what we offer. This is what good looks like for us. If it doesn't match what it looks like for you, either how do we rationalize that to make it work, or you know, at some point, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. So I think that's probably the toughest part, is understanding that everyone has their own individual expectations, and I probably see more of your child during the day potentially than you do. These are my kids. I might not be perfect, but I guarantee you there is no bad intent. And so it's really, it's difficult to manage everyone's at the same time. When you only have maybe one or two children that you care about more, but those are yours. 1,200 are mine. And trying to match what's best for all versus what's best for one or two is tricky.
And I suppose, you know, if you're kind of watching the unique challenges they're all going through, and you're being a part of that and advising the teachers on that, it's very much a, you know, bond or connection, and lots of challenges there for you, I can imagine.
Good challenges though. It's fantastic if
it's a meaningful impact for work.
Right? Yeah, and parents want nothing but fantastic experience for their kids. Exactly the same as I do. You know, and trying to make sure that I meet those is something that keeps me awake at night, but it's like, what a honourable challenge, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've got quite a different approach to how we prioritise education. Someone asked me the other day, what do you think is the most important thing we teach in schools? Right? It's good coffee, isn't it? Yeah. I told you, John. Amazing. What's the most important thing when it comes to teaching a child? Because we're in a position here where AI is coming in, we need to teach kids about this and that. When they asked me, I said, the most important thing that we could teach young people are the things that stand the test of time. It's character traits and its values, right? Because they influence the decisions we make. Would you agree that character development is more important than academics?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll come back with a roundabout answer to get there. Quite often, and you probably see it in your own institute, at the heart of our school, at the heart of our academy is, and as you go around, you know, at the heart of it is resilience, at the heart of it is character, at the heart of it is challenge. It's the wrong model to think there's only one thing at the heart, because I want them all. I'm not prepared to give up on resilience for challenge or challenge for character. I want them all. So to say that character is more important than academics, I think would be to avoid what I'm saying is interdependent, right? We want to develop them all along at the same time. Do we have a system that prioritizes academia over everything else? Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge that we face.
And this is what I think is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that schools face. My sister's a teacher in the UK, and let's just say she's got 20 kids in her class, right? Over the whole year, I know for a fact that she's helped mentor children through the loss of their parents, through severe bullying, through, chronic diseases, whatever it is, right? In a situation like that, she'd get to the end of the year, if some of her kids have failed academically and the whole class score drops, they would look at that and say, that's been an unsuccessful year. Yeah. You haven't done your job as a teacher. Yeah. But they don't see the kind of the work that goes on behind the scenes with soft skills and the emotional support and the care that so many teachers have. And I think that's, soft skills to me are just hard skills that are difficult to measure, right? It's like these things are just as important, if not more important. Right. They're difficult to measure. Yeah. So let's call them soft skills, and let's have a system which bases the success or failure on metrics we can measure, like academics.
You value what you measure, and you measure in the end.
Right, but as a private school, to be competitive, you've got to be, we're the best in Dubai for this academics, or we're striving to be, or whatever it is, right?
Yes, but I refuse to believe that we can't have children that are happy and well and curious and good at maths and science. I refuse to believe that's a possibility. Yeah. The fact that it may be the truth somewhere means that we've not done a job. Right? There is no way you would have a child here who could become the best whatever at Taekwondo in the world and be miserable at the same time. You wouldn't accept it. Why do we accept that in education? Why do we have these fantastic, curious, excitable, wonderful relationships in loneliness? And then all of a sudden they become bored and having to fit to exams. These are not mutually exclusive things. We should have kids who can have great relationships and good literacy.
So do you think that we're measuring schools the wrong way?
Potentially, there's a gap, right? There's a gap. The academic, again, you can't critically think random. I couldn't ask you now to go and solve heart surgery because you don't have the expertise in heart surgery.
No, it wouldn't go well. No.
Right. Someone would be in trouble. So I wouldn't ask you to do that. But your expertise lies in a particular field and you could critically think about that field. So when you're talking about is knowledge important, massively important, because children don't just randomly learn to solve problems. They have knowledge and they have process. They can solve problems. So it's really important that we do focus on making sure children have the right knowledge.
Yeah.
Whatever we define as the right knowledge. If we're not measuring the other stuff, it's not a matter of giving you a grade and your positivity. It's understanding, is my program working? If I can't make sure that children are becoming more curious or remaining curious, then I've got a failure in my system. So I need to go back and look at where's the gap I need to fill, what's the process I need to change. So it's not about giving kids you're really good at being positive and you're fantastic at problem solving. It's saying this system is supposed to produce a child that looks like X. If it's not, fix the system, not fix the kid.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Do you think that when they do the KHDA kind of assessment, or they do the Ofsted reports in the UK, right? Do you think there is this increasing focus on soft skills and character and this sort of stuff, or do you think it's still mostly majority academic?
I'm on the fence for most of your questions. Frustrating. There is definitely an increasing move towards people worrying and caring about what you're defining as soft skills there. Collaboration, resilience, what a child is, where they are to help them flourish. But systemically, it's going to take a long time to unpick what schools have been assessed on previously, which is, are they making good progress? And progress is generally measured against academic standards.
Yeah, brilliant. Before we sat down, we spoke about bullying a little bit. And I said to you, I see schools in Dubai advertising that they're a bully-free school. And before I could kind of finish that sentence, you were like, nonsense. And I think that's, again, it goes back to being authentic, right? You understand that bullying is just this, horrible part of the human condition, which we can't fully prevent. And I often feel that schools have an enormous amount of pressure placed on them by parents to make sure their child never goes through bullying. But a lot of that is a perception stage or an education stage for parents to understand that actually this is a natural part of my child's development. They will go through it. Of course, there needs to be that care from schools to mitigate it, to prevent it as much as possible, and then to help the child and the parents transition through it. How do you approach that in Arbor? How do you approach the subject, the very, very sensitive subject of bullying, both with kids and with parents?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, just to make sure we all agree, bullying is a horrible situation to find yourself in, but kids themselves can be inadvertently cruel in a way. And as you say, is that the human condition? I guess we're working on that all the time. But to say there's zero bullying, zero tolerance for bullying, no question.
Yeah.
Zero bullying becomes tricky to manage because, there's always situations. How do we manage it? Really proactive. So you want to be proactive, not reactive. So your pastoral care system should, be talking about the language we use, the kindness we use, the tolerance we use, all those sorts of things. And then at Arbor, we have a very restorative approach. So, sanctions have a place. Certainly sanctions have a place to say that whatever happened is not okay. But it is very restorative. So making sure that people understand that there was a wrong, making sure that the person who's been affected has a voice in it, making sure that the person who did the bullying in this case understands their part to play. So the restorative part is important, and it means that you can move past it. Because sanctions alone don't work, right? Sanctions alone are a band-aid. So proactive, restorative, but high expectations that this is not okay.
Do you think the transient and mix of culture kind of element here of living in Dubai and having students in a school in Dubai from all over the world makes it more likely for them to go through bullying than in other places?
No, I would argue no, because they are, a lot of our kids are third culture kids. They're coming in here as third culture kids, and because they are quick to make friends, quick to break up, quick to realize it can be transient, I would argue that the diversity is important. Diversity actually reduces it because it prevents cliques from forming.
Just a quick shout out to the guys at Shield who manage this podcast, come up with the strategy behind the podcast, help me schedule interviews, as well as do all of the editing and the producing of the podcast. Without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this podcast. If you would like to create your own podcast, I can't recommend the Shield team enough. They have done well over 100 episodes for me over the last few years, and I've been so pleased with the results. So have a look in the description of this video or the podcast episode, and you'll see how to get in touch with them yourself. Yeah.
Right. So, and also I would say...
It increases tolerance as well, I think, to a degree. But it highlights very, very clear differences between kids, right?
Right. And of course, Dubai is a city of dichotomies from wealth, culture, religion, background, all those sorts of things. So trying to celebrate everything in difference is important. And again, if I go back to eco-literacy or an ecosystem, it is resilient in its diversity. That's almost immeasurable. It's the more links you can form in an ecosystem, even if one bit falls, one bit collapses, the system will emerge, right? It will respond. So if you think of that, diversity is one of the strengths, the key parts of an ecosystem. If you have a lack of diversity, there's a higher chance that your system will fail.
Yeah.
So that's why diversity inclusion shouldn't become categorized. They should be a strength of who you are.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point of view as well. I love the fact that my kids are growing up in a city where it's very normal for them to have, dozens of friends from dozens of different countries in every single continent. I love that. I think that gives them such a depth of understanding of culture. What's interesting when it comes to bullying is I think it's less the kids picking up on their cultural differences and more the parents. Right. And a lot of that kind of, if the bullying occurs, it can actually often stem from the parents and their own insecurities or their own kind of prejudices. Have you ever noticed that?
Put me in a difficult position. There might be parents listening. There's a lot we can do in the time we have for children at school, but most, let's say if I focus on the green side of things, we could teach children to be eco-warriors really, really quickly.
Yeah.
They'll stop using plastic. They'll tell you off to buy plastic bags. They'll switch off the lights.
Yeah. Really, my daughter's running around turning all the lights up in the house all the time, including the Wi-Fi. Right. So that's down to you if my Zoom call's cut out.
But that's a really easy switch to turn on. It's also an easy switch to be turned off because it's not a change in the hard things, the values, the attitude, the behaviors, the beliefs. Most of that occurs at home, whether it be about green sustainability, or whether it be about tolerance and understanding. Yeah. So that is, the formation of a child and their values. Most of it comes from home. So I guess what we're dealing with is that, for better or for worse, because that's what mums and dads bring to it. You educate a child, you are the holder of their values. We're trying to supplement, add, build, modify, not modify would be the wrong word, bring it to life, I guess, in the way that we think it should be. So to answer your question, yes, mums and dads have a massive impact. like the biggest impact, without a question, on values and attitudes, behaviours and beliefs, and managing all those different ones in school is tricky.
When you look back at your career as a headmaster, what are you most proud of?
So many fantastic moments.
What really lights you up when you look back and you're like that? It could just be a one-off moment with a parent or a child or a teacher, or it could be a big event or something.
There's a couple that stand out for me, and I have to admit I got a bit teary, in the school. One was only a couple of days ago, but there was a day when we opened up our biodome. One of our biodomes is a bit of an inspirational learning space, and we said we'll have Discovery Tuesday. So any child who had an additional need, whether it be anxiety, whether it be EAL, so language difficulties and new to English, whether it be high-level autism, we set up a space where all of the sensory education, all their needs were like in place. And I walked in there, and there's just say 30 odd kids. It was emotionally good, like emotionally good. The kids were interacting, they were engaged, they were learning, they were moving. Every single, imagine a space set up, especially for children with difficulties, where every one of their needs was met, and they were flourishing. It was a moment of absolute flourishing, and I actually had to step back and wipe my eyes. So that stands out to me, an inclusive moment where the children were flourishing. We had the perfect opportunity.
Is that something Arbor focuses on a lot, inclusivity?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, again, an ecological worldview says you can't exclude bits. Yeah. They're a critical part of diversity. And then just the other day, we had a visit from Isatu Sisa, who's one of our house patrons, who's a no-name to the children, right? She's a Gambian female activist who does microeconomy there to look after the ladies. And what got me teary is when she walked in, she was a superstar. So the community, the connectivity they had with this person through the school meant that they were cheering from the rafters, they were asking for signatures, and that was emotional to me, because it was clear that what we're doing is build a connection. Yeah. And that connectivity and community is just critical. And so that was I was proud of that.
Is there a, I mean, we've spoken about sustainability a lot, and your focus on that, your personal passion with that. Tell me a little bit about your trip to Kenya, because we're actually, you weren't aware of this, but we're connected to the same school in Kenya, Kirigu Primary School, where the Warrior Academy teaches 800 kids every single week. And we've got 3 or 4 instructors there who are employed to teach. And we send uniforms here. So a lot of our students watching this have actually sent uniforms to that school. But tell us a lot about your connection to that school exactly.
So I think we connected through the same person. So our uniform provider, Capes, one of their pillars, I guess, of what they do is that for every uniform we purchase, they provide a uniform for a child in need. So we ended up connecting with Kirigu, and so we provide uniforms. And then as a part of that, myself and another staff member, we went to visit. This is sort of see how it works. And that was an emotional moment. So we got to visit at Kirigu, we got to see the challenges and successes. We got to walk away from that thinking, any challenges we face are of a different scale. B, what we're doing with the uniforms was a phenomenal thing to help those children. And then C, as we kind of went on from that visit to another part of the country where we saw, and without going into detail, for me, it was a manifestation of what we're trying to achieve with our children in the long run. And that the concept of how to change the world away from charity, sorry, not away from charity, but aside from just giving money, was evident, and I could see the connection between what we're trying to achieve in Arbor and what was evident there. Yeah. And that for me was a fantastic connection. So I had a blast. Yeah. I'm excited to hear that you're connected with the school.
Yeah, definitely. And it's amazing what the power of a uniform can do. And I remember just down the road from Kirigu Primary School in a place called Thika. It's about half an hour drive away. It's a homeless shelter. And that was one of our first Warrior Academy clubs, scholarship clubs. And it's a converted pigsty, essentially. And you've got 30 boys in bunk beds, all kind of squished together in this one place. And they've got 6 months to transition these young boys from being homeless, a lot of them struggling with substance abuse, malnutrition, terrible conditions that they previously lived in, to then get them into full-time education. And our role within that is 6 months of character development training, where we also give them a uniform. And the concept there is that if we can influence their character, we can influence the decisions they make. So when they go to school, they make the right decision. They get that one shot at education again, and they stick with it rather than running away from authority. But the power of a uniform is fascinating, because when for us as martial artists, when we wear a uniform, you basically put on this identity. Right? Now you're a martial artist. And when as you know, kids have such incredible imaginations. And when you give a child a martial arts uniform, suddenly they're on this black belt journey. They're a martial artist and they make better decisions. And so I remember giving a uniform out to one of the students in this homeless shelter, converted pigsty, and his face just lit up. And this was his only other set of clothes, apart from the kind of torn, dirty clothes he had. And now we've got, we'll add some videos of this where you can see all these students in uniforms, 2,500 kids around the world in developing countries in uniforms, and that is the power of a uniform. It's often giving someone an identity, and just from a superficial point of view, those uniforms and clothing and everything means just so much in a lot of impoverished areas like that. So it's incredible the work you're doing there, and I think it ties in very, very well to sustainability, right? And actually, you can talk about sustainability, but being authentic as a school and through leadership is actually getting out there with the kids and saying, this is sustainability. This is what it actually looks like on the ground. Yep. You can teach a child, but when you show them and they live it, and they breathe it, and they act it, then they fully understand it. And that's essentially what we're trying to do here at the Warrior Academy is embed that concept that they can actually impact the world for good.
So it's a mindset, and I think we touched on this just before, is the operational decisions we take in the day to use plastic or not use plastic, no judgment, is an easy switch. Yeah. It's an on-off switch. And as a school, we can model that. We can choose to model that. So how we manage our building, how we manage our transport, how we manage our food system, those are on-off switches. Those are actually ways for us to model. So when I'm telling the children one thing, they're not seeing a lack of authenticity in what we're delivering. But the sustainability means maintaining status quo by default. Are we really happy with status quo at the moment? Of course, really we're happy to just keep what we've got now. That's such a low bar. Because if we're not sustainable, which most of the time we're not, where are we? We're unsustainable. If our aim is well-being and we're not well, where are we? We're unwell. Yeah. So all the time we're aiming for this low bar, falling off it and being in the area we don't want to be. So sustainability then I think really becomes the wrong word to use when you're trying to achieve more. And so you're trying to achieve, I hope, in a similar way that we are, to change the world. And you don't do that by aiming for status quo. No. So you push beyond, you go beyond, you open this academy, you change their mindset that there is a different way to be. Yeah. Switching off the light is kind of an operational decision. Yeah. There's a different way to be, and if we can change their mindset over a long period of time, that's the way forward. The operational decisions is on off. And so when you're talking about a 6-month window to do that, that's a challenge. Yeah. Ideally, I've got 12 years of module. Yeah. And if I can't achieve it in 12 years, then I would consider that to be a failure. Is maybe a bit tough, but that's the challenge I'm faced with. If I had a child for 12 years, and my theory of action is if I do this, they're going to come out like this, how am I going to know? How am I going to know if I've actually achieved it? How do you measure that? Yeah. Right, and it's not exam results. No. Exam results are a means to an end, right? And if we're seeing the exam results as the end in and of itself, that's the problem.
I think it's brilliant. Listen to what you're saying. There's so much of a carryover to what we're doing here. Martial arts is great. It's a great vehicle to develop character. But a child wants a black belt, right? A parent wants a child to have a black belt character, and our instructors want our kids in here, to have a black belt character because ultimately it sets them up for a happy and successful life as an adult. And what I always say to our instructors and to our parents is, our legacy at the Warrior Academy won't just be what happens in the dojo. It's what our students do when they leave. Correct. And a lot of that stuff, we're thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the line, right? Even our students in orphanages right now, what do they then go and do? Can we provide opportunities around the world? And what's the greater impact of that legacy? And it sounds like it's a very similar thing for you, right? It's not so much about the academics. It's not so much about the martial arts program. It's about what they then do with that knowledge. Correct.
It's an ever receding horizon. You want to get a black belt. I'm sure once someone achieves a black belt, they only realize how much they don't know.
Yeah. You suddenly realize you're just getting started.
That's the problem of mastery. And so every time, if you hit sustainability, the only point is that it's not going to be enough. Yeah. Because the horizon will then recede. So if we only aim for that, right? If your end point was black belt, then I'm going to retire. Yeah. That's the wrong attitude. You're continuously progressing. The black belt's just a measure. And I guess it's a standard that people understand. In the same way that an exam a measure that people understand. You and I know that if you get whatever an A in maths, you can kind of comprehend what that means. Someone can manipulate number, they can understand calculus, that they're fairly handy with money, something like that. You've got an understanding. What is the transferable skill that they've learned out of that? Because the exam itself is just a measure. It's like wrapping a black belt around yourself. You know what that means and what they can know and do.
Yeah.
But the black belt itself, you could throw it away. The kid could still do it.
Yeah.
Or the adult could still do it.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating there, isn't it? The kind of the similarities. And I feel like schools are under a bit of pressure these days to evolve out of what a lot of people are calling a kind of industrial era approach, where it was one size fits all, and a lot of the population goes through the academic and the school system in order to then be a cog in a machine, so that they can become a worker bee and work for the system. Now, I had a really interesting conversation the other day with Rama, who's an educational psychologist, on this, and my point of view was, well, it's really difficult for schools to change that because they have to mass educate huge populations, and B, what do we expect as parents? Because ultimately, a lot of the kind of nurturing and stuff we need to do has to come from the home, right? There's only so much a school can realistically do when they've got 20 kids in a class. So I guess it all comes down to how does Arbor approach developing the individual, right? And one of the things you said was status quo, and I love that, because isn't it funny how we don't want children to have disruptive behavior, but when they're adults, we're like, everyone, let's have some disruptive behavior and challenge the status quo, right? How can we take a child who's naturally got disruptive behavior? Maybe they're very creative, they're very excited, they're a bit of a leader, but it shows up as disruptive behavior, and channel it in the way so that there is order in the class, but they're not kind of shying away or hiding that or dimming that light when they're older. Yeah.
I mean, you've basically asked the question, what's the art of teaching? Which is tough to catch, right? But let's imagine a born teacher, someone who walked into it and was able to orchestrate a class perfectly. You would have a deep level of knowledge of content. You would have a deep level of knowledge of pedagogy, how to get that content across to a child, and you would have a deep care for the relationships. Because if you know and care about every one of those children in the classroom, which 99.9% of teachers do, that's the only way you can manage it. And then so you've got, for example, 20 children in the class. Some of them might have had a fight with mum this morning. Some of them might have had mum who's unhappy in her job. Some of them might have had a fantastic day and night and morning. They're super excited. And each one of those comes with their own idiosyncrasies in the morning. And so an amazing teacher will kind of orchestrate that. And they won't get it right every single day. And so that each child gets a chance to shine. And so you'll see on most schools, websites and marketing materials, we allow every child to shine. We personalize all their learning. It's every child is going to have the chance to be amazing, which is it's fantastic intent. That is the aim of every school, right? It's a difficult challenge to meet because it's just, how do I say that? It's an ongoing challenge to meet every single child every single day and make sure that they're all pushing forward. So that's an honourable challenge that we stay on top of, and knowing where they're at and knowing their relationships and caring deeply is critical. It's something we work on every day, I guess. Yeah. What does great teaching look like?
Have you seen things evolve quite a lot recently?
Yeah, certainly in my school. And I guess we're known for as a school that's holistic, as a school that cares about being able to flourish. And flourishing means, the head, heart, hand, and spirit. All those four things being important. If a child is not emotionally ready, they're not going to be cognitively ready.
Yeah.
You're not going to teach someone who's not ready to learn. So you have to get that at first. What helps children being ready to learn? To be safe, to be enjoyable, to know someone there that cares about them. If those things are in play, then they're going to be ready to learn. Yeah. Try and teach a 4-year-old ABCs if they're screaming in the corner because they miss their mum. Yeah. It's not going to happen.
There's certainly no point in challenging a child until they're part of a community that they feel safe in, right? The Warrior Method, I read a book on it. It's got 4 steps: community, inspire, challenge, lead. Community is the foundation of everything. There's no point in us trying to challenge a child to perform better or, whatever it is, do a leadership task and improve their skills if they don't feel safe and supported in their community. So, community is literally the foundation from which academics or character evolves, right?
And we said earlier, you're trying to challenge every child. So you only grow when you're challenged. Right? And academia is the same. You're only going, if you already know your ABCs, the next thing is the challenge. So the question isn't necessarily how do you deal with children who are ready to be, whose energy is bubbling over. It's the question of how do you put them in that productive difficulty, that zone of difficulty that you really want. It's not too high, not too low, it's the Goldilocks.
Yeah.
In English, it's Vygotsky's theory of, oh gosh, now I'll get myself in trouble because you need to cut that bit out. Proximal development. Vygotsky's theory of proximal development. Basically, it's the Goldilocks. How do you put them just high enough that they're challenged, but just low enough that they can have some success?
Right.
And you'll see it everywhere. So getting them into
the comfort zone, essentially, right?
or getting them just out of their comfort zone.
Yeah,
just
into the high performance zone.
Right.
Comfort zone, high performance zone, or hyper anxiety stage, where they high performance zone, they're doing something within their abilities, which is challenging and uncomfortable.
Yes.
But if they achieve that, they then go back into the comfort zone and it expands. If they go past that, they're in the hyper anxiety stage where it's like, at this stage, they're doing something outside of their abilities. They don't succeed. They go back to the comfort zone and it shrinks. Same kind of principle, right?
And you see what you'll probably see for a child. Let's say they were learning to read. And in school, they've got the supports, they've got safe, they're practicing, they've got buddies next to them who are having the same level of success or challenge. And so they go home and you talk to the teacher when you pick them up. They say, oh, we had Sally today and she managed to read this book, all these 10 words. And then you come home and say, oh, Molly, can you read these 10 words to me? She looks at you blindly. And you're like, oh, God, the teacher said you could read. But they've lost those supports.
Yeah.
They haven't hit mastery yet. So if you take away some of those supports, the comfort, the safety, the practice, all of a sudden, if they're not at mastery, they're unable to do it.
It's the context, right? You take a martial artist from the dojo where they feel safe and secure, and then you put them in a stressful situation where they're being assessed. It's like the context has changed.
Yeah. And those the scaffolds that they have that make them able to do it here, until they've become a master of that thing, when you take them out and take away those scaffolds. So in that instance, a book that they could read in class, the rule of thumb is that the one that they take home to read with mum and dad should be 75% of the difficulty that they'll be doing in class. So it falls back into that zone where they're expanding their comfort around it. So those concepts of great teaching, again, are challenge them just enough in class that they're working on it, and then when they come home, give them something that they have success on.
Brilliant. Awesome stuff. I'm going to finish off with one question. Nothing too tricky. If you had to give one piece of advice to the heads of all of the schools in Dubai, just one piece of advice based on your experience, your approach to leadership, what would it be?
They'll be laughing at me when I give it. Okay, maybe one thing that I feel has been successful for us, whether they take it or not, is absolute authenticity in everything that you do. Step up to the mark with authenticity. If you can't do it, say you can't do it. If it's not in your brief for your school, then don't advertise it. If you want to increase recruitment, don't sell it. Be authentic and tell the story. And if all those things come together, then people will like what you do and they will enjoy what you do. So just be authentic. Be yourself.
Brilliant. What a great way to end. Well, fantastic, insightful podcast. I think so many parents are going to really benefit from that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.